House of Urrard impacts, which is session 3 of the inquiry, taken slightly out of order. Before we move on, can I ask the parties to introduce themselves?
Yes, sir. My name is Susan Leslie. I'm a legal director with Morton Fraser on behalf of the promoter. On my right is Mr Graham Kerr of Jacobs UK, and on my left is Dr Blewett from Transport Scotland. We don't anticipate needing any other witnesses to be part of the discussion, but they're in the room should they be required.
Perfect. Thanks for that. And Mr Campbell, no introductions are needed.
Well, thank you, sir. That's very kind of you.
I'll let you do that.
I'm John Campbell. I'm a Queen's Counsel at the Scottish Bar, and I represent Urrard House LLP, House of Urrard LLP. And Claire Cannon, who gave evidence in the inquiry session, is with me to my left. I don't have any other witnesses.
Thanks for that. So, as we agreed also this morning, we will be covering at this session only the commercial interests of the estate, given that the other interests covered in the hearing statements have been covered already in the inquiry session. So the format of the hearing session really will just be a structured discussion, much more relaxed than the inquiry session led by me. So moving on to the agenda, we can jump to agenda item 8, which is the commercial impacts on the estate. And my sort of first open-ended question, I suppose, is where, if anywhere, either in the Transport Scotland material before me or in the House of Urrard information before me, are the likely impacts of the scheme on the house letting operations of the estate set out? In other words, is there any more than anecdotal evidence before me? Mr Campbell first, perhaps, on that.
The answer is no. The proper answer to your question is paragraph 17 of Claire Cannon's recognition. The operation has not been in place for long enough to, for example, produce annual accounts or to look for accounting trends. And so it's been necessary to put it in the way it's put, in a general way. The only hard figure in that paragraph is about 40 weeks a year, which I think Claire Cannon will confirm to you. But of course it's not known how this will be affected, which is one of the reasons that compensation is always delayed in the case of road schemes. But I think Ms Cannon, who actually runs the house, will help you with detail of that house and also the other houses. I'd rather not give you second-hand evidence. I do know the answer.
Perfect.
To that. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, we have one small holiday cottage, and in the vicinity of the A9, 6 houses known as the steadings, which are tenancies, plus the actual Urrard house itself, which we have last summer decided to let as a self-catering accommodation before we enter into the shooting season, September to January, when the house is used for shooting parties, and that is all income.
The 6 steading tenancies, those are longer-term residential tenancies?
There's 5 steadings
5.
tenancies, and the White Cottage, which is separate, and there's a 7th property, which is actually at the entrance to the estate on the B Road, which probably won't be directly affected by the construction of the A9.
That's at the foot of the drive, B Road.
Yeah. So the 5 steading tenancies are residential rather than holiday let?
Yes, one of them's an employee.
So I think one's an employee, 4 are tenancies.
Tenancies.
One is a holiday let. Is that right?
And the White Cottages are separate.
White Cottage is a separate holiday let.
And Urrard House itself, in the September to January shooting season, is it still self-catering or is it sort of serviced and catered accommodation at that stage?
It's catered accommodation.
And the 40 weeks per year figure that Mr. Campbell mentioned in terms of rental, is that for Urrard House itself?
Yes, because we're under the heading of Urrard House. So yes, that would be 40 weeks a year.
That's for the house itself.
For the house itself.
It might be as well to explain, as I understand it, and I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that shooting parties don't come for long periods. That typically will come for 2 or 3 nights, perhaps longer if the landlords are lucky, but typically they're quite short duration of parties of up to, as you can see, it sleeps 18 in the house. It may not have 18, every night for three nights. But when one goes, then there's a clean-up, and then the next lot arrive.
Yeah. So the 40-week notional figure would be sort of cumulative. That's the number of nights where people would be in the house. Yeah,
considering that we've just started the sort of letting during the summer and throughout the rest of the year, that's partly a predicted rental number of weeks.
I think it might be important for the reporter to know when you bought the estate.
Oh, well, yes, we bought the estate in February 2013.
But its method of operation has changed quite recently?
Only in the actual function of the main house itself. I know it's always been a business concern from the...
Yes, that's what I meant. The way that you operate Urrard House itself has changed.
Yeah.
And that's why the 40-week figure is partly a prediction.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. And from Transport Scotland's perspective, is there any evidence before me on an assessment really of the commercial interests of the estate?
The assessment of the interest...
I'm sorry, I'm talking about the house letting at the minute.
Okay. Yeah. I think the only other bit of information that would be before you, which would give a guide as to the letting income, would be in the estate particulars, which I do understand are a little dated. But on page 30 of the estate particulars, there's a table at the bottom, which is TS-422.
422, yeah.
There's a table at the bottom which gives an indication of each of the properties which have been explained and their rental per calendar month income in the last column. And as I say, these are figures from when the estate particulars were put together, I think back in 2016. So they may not be the current rental incomes, but do give a value for you.
Okay, thanks. And in terms of the socio-economic chapter of the environmental statement, there's nothing in there on individual business impact?
We undertook a survey of the estate as part of the preparation of the material for the environmental statement. The cover page of the survey, due to the sort of commercial aspects of the information collected, is contained before you, so that's TS 078.5. And the assessment of the land use impacts on the estate are included in Chapter 8 of the environmental statement, so that's CD 11. and associated appendices of that, which you'll find in CD12 and figures in CD13. So we were aware through our consultation of not only the survey which I undertook and met with Mr. Cannon and Mr. Price and their advisors at the time, CKD, Galbraith, but also our other stakeholder engagement that they've had, particularly led by Mr. Allen.
Okay. And from the estate's perspective, is there anything in that assessment, so TSO 78.5 and the related chapter and appendices, that you particularly take issue with?
Sorry, bear with me.
Yeah, we'll have to refer to the document first. Probably a bit out of date.
Which page was it of 78?
It was 078.5, is that right, Mr. Kerr?
Yes, you won't find very much on 078.5 as it's a cover page to put before the reporter that we undertook the survey. Perhaps it would be easier to look at the hearing statement produced by Transport Scotland.
Yep.
So that is because that draws information from the relevant sections of the environmental statement and other things, and it starts to discuss the potential and residual sort of impacts on the commercial estate business carried out on Urrard estate at paragraph 3.18 of the Transport Scotland hearing statement.
And is there anything in there specifically about the house letting side of the business?
No more than we've discussed. We were aware of the number of the properties, we were aware of the particulars, the rental income, and, as I say, the sort of socio-economic impact, which considered the estate as a whole rather than the specific elements of it.
Probably nothing in detail there for you to respond to.
No, there isn't. I'm just looking for it. But can I take it, therefore, that the promoters are content with the description which has been given by the witness in that part of her hearing statement, 17, 18, 19, 20?
Yes, in terms of the estate activities, there's some very minor discrepancies between what's in the estate particulars, numbers of acres and that kind of thing, but nothing material. No, nothing material.
Yes, I accept that there's some arithmetical correction needed, but I can probably do that in the closing statement.
Okay, so moving on and really just posing the same question in relation to the other activities of the estate, i.e. the sporting activities. Where are the likely impacts set out? And I'm presuming from your perspective you would refer me again to your hearing statement. Is that right? Do you want to briefly run through that?
That's paragraph 19 you want to run through.
So, do you want me to read it?
No, just run through it. Right?
So, what we do is we run driven pheasant shooting, partridge shooting days during the season. We also provide stalking opportunities for clients, and all of those, most of those, the majority of those activities take place on the open hill ground or on land above the A9. Although we do use part of the woodland near the house for several of the pheasant drives on or near the battlefield.
And that's to the south of the current A9?
Yes.
Yep.
I think perhaps obviously you can't shoot towards the A9.
No, we can't. There is a, we have to watch our proximity to the A9 when shooting. We are confined to certain fields. So once construction of the A9 starts, then that particular area will no longer be viable as to put down any birds and therefore there won't be any shooting activity, which amounts to, near the house, 2 to 3 drives. But we also have land on the top side of the A9, on the north side of it, that we've recently started to use for a pheasant drive as well.
Okay.
So we won't be
there's
able
a
to
plan
use
of the drives, isn't there, in the
in the
sales particulars?
Yeah.
Yes, so that's a TS42 and it's on PDF page 34.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Kerr. So of those drives indicated on that plan, if you've got it before you, are you saying that the closest of those would be affected, or are you saying that there are new areas that you're using that aren't marked there that would be affected?
So any drives that are on the south side of the A9 would be unusable because of the noise and disturbance from any the construction work. Birds like relative peace and quiet.
And I'm thinking particularly the drive shown to the north. On the plan, there are drives shown to the north.
Yeah, I'm looking at those now. So the ones that are closest to the A9 would be affected, which would probably be the first 2 to the north, rather than one.
Okay,
Oh,
I've got
there we
that. And the other sporting activities? There's fishing as well, isn't there?
The fishing won't be affected as such because it's on the River Garry, and that's it won't be affected. What we're also worried about with the shooting is that we need access to the hill at all times, and once construction starts, especially on the Glengunnig bridge, we're worried about how we will be able to access the hill at any time of the year.
Does the estate employ a gamekeeper?
Yes.
On what basis?
Full-time.
Full-time. And that's one employee, is it?
That's one, yeah, and I'm the other one.
Right.
So I have 2 full-time employees.
Okay. Anything else that you want to say, first of all, on the sporting activities?
Could I just ask Ms. Cannon a question for you? Is it ever the case that you have more than one shoot going on the same day?
No.
Well, some states do, so...
No. No, one's not.
Okay. It's just that with 20 drives, or plus or minus 20 drives, how many drives would you shoot in a day?
4, but because to have that many drives allows us then to accommodate a party, and then they can shoot back to back, which means they can have 2 days of shooting and they're not shooting the same drive, or even 3 days.
But not more than one shoot going on at the same time?
No,
I don't know, sir.
no.
Perhaps you're an expert in this.
No, there's only ever one. No,
So I'm listening
we're
with
not that.
interest, but the way the estate
Commercially
operates
minded.
is one shoot at a time. Okay, from a Transport Scotland perspective...
Sorry, there was one other thing.
Oh, sorry, Mr Campbell.
I wonder if Ms. Cannon could just tell us a little bit about what's known as putting pheasants down. Clearly they're bred for commercial shooting. Are they all put down in the one place and then dispersed, or are they put down across the estate with the hope that they will stay where they're put down?
No, we have what's known as release pens, and determining where on the shoot we keep our best drives. Most of them are, and they have a combination of partridge and pheasant. So most of the partridge drives are on the hill, away from the A9. We tend to just have pheasant drives nearer the house. We tend not to put as many pheasants in those drives, only because of it's in the proximity of the A9. So most of the pheasants are put down in their thousands further up the hill.
And what are the impacts of that sort of deployment in terms of how the proposed scheme impacts on that? Would the proposed scheme mean that you would need to change that deployment somehow between the different birds?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the number of pheasants you put down determines then the number of days that you can actually offer as a shoot day. So the less birds you put down, the less days you can offer. Obviously, to make the estate viable, you need to put down a minimum of 40,000 birds to be able to offer at least 40 to 50 days shooting. To lose the drives on the south side of the A9 would have an impact, because we have less opportunities elsewhere on the estate to put down pheasants. So we've got less drives to offer, basically.
Okay, thanks for that. Anything else on that before I move over to Transport Scotland?
No, thank you.
No. From a Transport Scotland perspective, again, the question is where, if anywhere, in the material before me is that aspect of impacts taken into account?
Okay, well, again, the information is provided from paragraph 3.18 of the hearing statement. Specifically, pheasant and game partridge shooting is described in the paragraphs that follow through to paragraph 3.41, and there's various bits of information which are included in those sections. Perhaps I think there were a number of, if you break it down, a number of discrete points which were raised by Urrard Estate. So, firstly, the putting down the pheasants and the location of the drives. Monica, if it's possible to put up the diagram of the shoot again, please. We were hearing this morning about impacts on the battlefield, so I'll use some of those descriptions here. So drives 1 and 2, which are shown on the estate particulars, are located in the Claverhouse field, I think as it was described earlier in other evidence. And the way the drives operate is birds flushed from the woodland on the banking, and pheasants laid down in the land above that in their release pens, and flushed by the beaters down to where the guns are, which are shown as the dots. So the shooting party would be within the field and shooting up towards the banking as the birds are flushed down from there. So given that happens now, and given that, albeit there's northbound widening, it's very much in the vicinity and on line with the existing scheme, I don't physically see anything prohibiting that that shooting to continue to take place. I would accept that it remains to be seen what the impact of the construction activities would have on the birds, but they are reared and managed in a discrete area through their feeding management. So they're brought on and grow, but they're also kept within an area because of the location of the feed. And I think if birds were still put down in there, then they'd be available to shoot. Ms Cannon has said that the majority of the pheasant shooting is up towards on the drives up the hill, and those, apart from perhaps drive number 3, which is at the top of the slope there, are discrete from the scheme and certainly unaffected by any land acquisition. Second point that was raised, I think, was about access. That's really important in terms of shooting parties getting about, and also day-to-day access in terms of the management of the birds during the season. So the continuation of the path, which runs around the back of the walled garden, for example, is quite important in terms of access to the release pens for the pheasant south of the A9 scheme, and the general management of the estate, and that will be protected through construction and maintained after operation as well. There will be construction activities on the major structures on the A9. The new bridge structure, should the scheme be consented, but their access would be maintained for those roads, and therefore use by the shoot and the shooting parties throughout the construction period. There's commitments within the environmental statement to that effect. So in CD11, Chapter 21, Schedule of Environmental Commitments, there are a number of commitments there which relate to maintenance of access.
Which mitigation items in particular? Can you give me the reference numbers?
Yes,
for
sure,
those?
I could. So table 21.2, which is on the page 3 of the PDF. And the first one there, SMC-CP1, access to from...
Sorry, hold on, I'm
Sorry,
just
yep,
getting
sure.
to page 3.
Okay.
Yep, so SMC...
CP1,
Yep.
I think is appropriate. CP2, which ensures access to land out with the land made available boundary, not that would be maintained or not prevented by the construction works. CP3 talks about consultation with affected landowners and occupiers undertaken about the location and timing of construction works to reduce disturbance. And I think I would also point you, sir, to SMC CP13, and I can read this out if it would help. Where there are sporting or fishing rights adjacent to the working area, reasonable endeavours will be taken to minimise interference with enjoyment of them, while recognising the primary objective to maintain a safe working environment for both contractors and users of the land and water. And that's sort of emphasised in part anyway, in Transport Scotland's hearing statement, that there's in paragraph 3.39, which states that the promoter is willing to continue discussions with the objectors with a view to agreeing certain matters, such as whether specific dates for sporting interests may be safeguarded. And this is something which has been discussed and agreed with the other sporting estate interests along the A9 Julian corridor. So a commitment there through what's in the ES as well as in the hearing statement to take due regard of the nature of the sporting activities and see if during the construction works measures can be taken place in order to mitigate the impacts.
Is there anything specific in the draft undertaking that should be added to that, or does that relate to physical measures and other issues?
So we do not at the moment have the information to be able to add anything specific to the draft undertaking, but Transport Scotland is more than happy to continue to engage with the estate.
That's something that could be developed in time and added to the undertaking?
Yes, potentially.
In relation to the access for the sporting activities and gaining access to the northern drives, is that gained through the Glengurnig underbridge?
Yes, that's my understanding is that's one of the
that's one of them?
Yeah, the two bridges at either side of the estate.
So how would the construction take place there? Would access always be available through Glengurnig, or at times a different access might need to be used?
I wonder, sir, if Mr. Robertson might be able to assist with this answer.
Yep.
From the outline constructability work that has been undertaken, and given the width of the existing underpass, it is envisaged that that particular underpass at Glengurnig would be extended whilst keeping the local road open, apart from very short-term closures for particular construction activities such as lifting beams over the road, which, for obvious safety reasons, would require the closure of the local road. But often those sort of activities can be undertaken at night time, and obviously with consultation with local landowners and the local authority.
Okay, thanks for that. Mr. Kerr, did I interrupt your flow of response? Is there anything more that you want to say on the sporting activities generally?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think the only other thing to add, we talked about the construction of the structures. There's obviously the mainline construction as well, and I would just point out through hearing other evidence that the construction activities, whilst they may be over a 2-year period, it wouldn't necessarily be continuous, and therefore the disturbance through construction, should there be any on the birds, would in part relate to what activities or construction activities are happening at certain points of the construction. And there would be other times during construction where construction activities would be more limited and therefore less disturbance.
Given that you mentioned the construction period, we've heard a sort of notional 2-year period mentioned during the inquiry this week. How firm or indicative or otherwise is that notional 2-year period?
Again, I think I might have to defer to Mr. Robertson.
Again, with regard to the construction of that particular length of the project, the key construction activities within that length would be the construction of the Urrard underbridge, which is a notable notable structure. And from the work that we've done, we estimate it's about 15 months in that sort of order to construct that particular structure, which is probably the most extensive part of the construction activities within that.
And is that 15-month period likely to be without a break? We heard from other evidence that construction will move along, so there can be significant breaks and so on.
From my experience when constructing bridges of that size, it's that, the construction sequencing of large structures like that are often continual.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't quite understand that answer. You're saying that construction sequences for a bridge, an overbridge, would be continuous throughout the project?
Sorry, once the construction has commenced, just moving through the various stages of the construction in a continuous manner.
And I'd taken that to mean that structure will take 15 months to construct,
yes,
and that would be a 15-month block without
without serious interruption, which is the converse of what you put to him, I think.
Well, I got his answer. I understand.
Yes, you got his answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that 15-month period, that is for the construction of that particular bridge. Other activities such as earthworks within that area would be undertaken in a shorter period of time.
Okay, thanks for that.
I think what's not known about the activities of the pheasant and partridge is the effect of large-scale construction in the sense of disturbance of habitat. We're quite accustomed, when looking at projects in a rural setting, to think about the arrival of either plant or machinery acting as a disperser of species which are to some extent territorial. Now, these species are territorial because they're put there, not because they're indigenous. What we don't know, and I don't mean any criticism by this, but I don't think that Transport Scotland know this either. We certainly don't know. We don't know what the arrival of large-scale plant to excavate. We don't know what effect that is going to have on these species which are placed there seasonally. If you look at what's going on down the road between Lunkerty and Burnham, some of the kit is pretty heavy and very large, and quite a large number of lorries and so on. And it may not be a matter for you, but it's a matter certainly for looking down the road, whether that has an effect, a dispersing effect on the species. So it's just a side note, really, but that is going to be a component of this,
of course,
issue.
Do we know that? I mean, road construction must have taken place in proximity to sporting estates before. Is there anything before me on that generally, or is there anything that you can add, Mr. Kerr, to that?
I think, well, first of all, you're right in saying there are other sporting estates which are affected by the A9 dualling programme. In respect of the impacts on sporting activity, a lot of those, particularly as you go further north, are more discrete from the construction works because they're more focused on stalking and grouse shooting. I don't have any references which I could give you about disturbance to the birds. I think all I would say is, in part, I accept what is being put forward by Urrard Estate. I think the other thing is, in terms of what Mr. Campbell has said, yes, the birds are put there and they're territorial partly because they are fed. And I think my professional opinion would be if they are put down and continue to be fed, they will generally stay in that location.
Okay, thanks for that. I think we've covered the issues. Is there anything else, first of all, from your perspective, that we should be covering?
19, 20, 20. No, not that I can see.
Okay, perfect. From Transport Scotland's perspective?
No, sir, we've nothing else to add to that which is contained in the hearing statement.
Perfect. Can I close this hearing session then, Mr. Campbell? Perfect. Okay. Thanks all for that. That was very helpful. So we're closing the hearing session and indeed finishing for the week. Thanks to all that have participated through the week. It's run very smoothly, I think, and thanks to all for assisting me in achieving that. So we will disband. I think this room needs to be cleared for the weekend, although there is storage available, and we'll meet again at 10 o'clock on Monday morning for the tourism impact session.
So could I thank you on behalf of the estate for harmonious and it's very smooth, as you say, 4 days.
Perfect.
Very much obliged. Thank you.
Thanks all.